Hello and welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife. And I don't know if you feel this way or if it is just me, but in this day and age of 24-hour news cycles where social media, headlines, gossip, rumors, information are coming at us at such a fast pace, it sometimes feels like we don't have time to slow down and calmly, critically think about things before we're expected to have an opinion about them or an emotional reaction to them. And so today we're going to talk about just taking that moment, exploring information, figuring out what sources are reliable and not reliable, and how to clear it out, all the noise, and find just the facts. So as always, I'm your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. Okay, so have you ever ran into the situation where something is presented to you and all of a sudden you're expected to have an opinion or a reaction or feelings about it? I know I have. In this, literally, we live in a 24-hour news cycle, whether it's through social media or the news itself. It feels like we're constantly bombarded with information and everyone expects us to have thoughts about it. And there are times where I really have to step back and be like, I don't know, because sometimes it looks like one thing, but then when you stop and think about it, you realize, oh, wait, this might be a justifiable reason. So, for example, there was an expenditure from DoD to the Disney that looked a little questionable that was pointed out recently with all of the auditing that's going on. And somebody asked my opinion on it because we're, again, a military family. And I said, well, if you stop and think about it, the military might be paying Disney for the rights to play Disney movies and shows and stuff on deployment, downrange, or in military movie theaters, or different situations like that. And then another friend of mine who is also military pointed out that overseas, there's streaming options for military families where they can watch some of these shows and TV show movies and stuff. And so when you stopped and looked at it from that perspective, it could be a very legitimate business expense. And so what initially looked potentially questionable ended up probably benign. And I still don't know 100% if that's exactly what that was. But that could be what that is. And so stopping and thinking about, wait a second, let's look at this from another perspective. What else could be going on here is always a really beneficial perspective to take. And oh my goodness, the rumor mill in the military is insane and it works 24/7. And it just, things go so fast. And it never hurts to just stop and take a minute and think about something before you respond to it. And you know what? Sometimes you don't need to respond. It's okay if you don't have an opinion about everything. That's all right. I know that it sometimes feels like we're supposed to, but we really don't have to have an opinion on everything. So we're going to go through, and I just want to point out some of the techniques I use to filter through all of this input noise that we get, all of this stuff that comes at us. One thing I've liked to do is look at multiple different sources, especially if it's a media outlet. I like to look at different ones from different perspectives. Ground news is one that I've recently discovered that I like using, but I'll look at everyone because if you take, for example, Fox and Daily Wire and CNN and BBC, and they're all covering the same article, and then you find what they have in common, that's probably the facts you should start with. Because everyone has bias. Everyone has bias. And I mean, I try to be, as clear cut with you guys as I possibly can, let you make your own decisions, but even I have bias. So I'm going to just be honest about that. Anyway, here are some of the things that I've seen military families concerned about recently in the last little bit. And some of them ended up being legit, and some of them ended up being misunderstood, and there was clarification made later on. So the first one was that remote work for military spouses. There was that big statement saying they have to return to the office mandate for all federal workers, and there wouldn't be any remote work left. And military spouses were rightly concerned because they were afraid that meant they were losing their jobs. And part of the reason why they had pursued federal jobs that allowed them to work remotely is because we do move around so much as members of the military community. And so it was reported that that was going to be what was going to happen. And again, they were concerned. Well, it turns out that the Office of Personnel Management made a clarification that military spouses are exempted from that directive, and then they will be allowed to continue working remotely. So I think sometimes, again, people jump to conclusions thinking it includes them when it doesn't, or, and this is another possibility, maybe it did, and then that was brought to their attention, and they're like, "Oh, well, that's not realistic. Yeah, they can have an exemption." So it could have been either one. I don't know which one it was, but the good thing is it's not a concern now. The next one was the VA there's been concerns that there was going to be cuts to VA services and things like that. These claims have been completely refuted by the leadership at the VA that they're not going to have to worry about that and that there's no official plans to reduce services in any way. In fact, they're working towards trying to expand services. So I think sometimes, like I said, people jump to conclusions, making assumptions because they've heard two things and they think that they go together, and they don't always. And one good thing that I heard is about the GI Bill, and we're going to be covering that later in this same episode. So we'll be getting to that in just a bit. But the other one is there was a misunderstanding when there was a removal of DEI, that was going to limit the ability to teach and cover the contributions of women and minorities in the military. But again, then the clarification was made that that is not going to be affected at all. And those are completely appropriate topics to discuss when teaching and discussing military history. I mean, logically, you could have come to that conclusion that that's probably what was going to be meant, but I could see why people might want clarification on that. And so it was not unreasonable to ask for clarification if that's what that meant. And obviously, it did not mean that. So that's one of those things. There was another statement in regards to changing in coverage on women's health for travel for women's health things, and people thought that that might include fertility treatments, and there was again reasonable concern that maybe individuals who were seeking fertility treatments and would have to travel for those, that there would be no compensation or assistance with that. And it turns out that those claims were also proven false. Those coverages are still going to stay intact. And so again, it's just taking those things and go and finding your sources. So for example, if you're in the middle of getting those fertility treatments and stuff, maybe call your provider, call your doctor, call whoever you were having to send that paperwork to get the refunds to begin with, and talk to them first because they're going to have the best information on the ground. Hopefully. I mean, maybe they don't and they're still figuring it out too. If that's possible. There was another rumor that I heard that I'm not going to throw out here because it ended up being completely unsubstantiated, but it was going all over the military spouse page that I'm a part of, and I have a source that had good information on that specific area of military life. And I was able to approach them personally and say, "Hey, I've heard XYZ. What do you know about that?" And they said, "Yeah, no, that's not a thing." So there are times where people will uh, sometimes come up with ideas that are just completely in left field and aren't founded at all. So always just be skeptical if you're getting a rumor and there's no sources behind it. But here's some stories that I did hear, and immediately I was like, "Wait, is this true?" Because they were ones I was concerned about or excited about, and I wanted, before I shared them with you guys or started forming an opinion or talking about them, I wanted to know that I had my facts straight. And one of them is that the GI Bill's benefits are being extended. There is going to be an additional 12 months of benefits available, and you can apply for those now if you're interested in that. But yeah, so an extension of GI Bill benefits, that's fabulous for every veteran out there who is trying to fund their education. So if you are in that position, please go get more information about that, pursue those options for you and your family. I'm super excited about that myself because I know quite a few people who are going to be directly affected by that. Okay, here's another one that I hadn't mentioned before, and it's because I was going through again connections and back channels that I have to verify the veracity of this statement. But it appears that so anyone who's been in the military for a while, you probably know this, but I'm just going to clarify in case there's people who don't know. You have something called BAS, and that's the basic allowance for subsistence, and it's basically your food allowance. And if you do not live in the barracks, you get about $300 a month to buy groceries and pay for food for yourself. And if you are on deployment, then they take your BAS because they're feeding you. And if you live in the barracks, they take your BAS so they can buy the food to feed you. Well, there's been a problem with that because evidently 11 installations were taking their soldiers' BAS and not providing adequate, healthy food options for those soldiers. In fact, investigation has now revealed that over $150 million that was collected just got diverted to other things, to the point where, and this is Fort Stewart, which collected $17 million to spend on food services, only spent $2.1 million on food services. So 14 plus $1 million just disappeared to the point where they could barely keep their DFACs or their dining facilities open. And this was happening at Fort Stewart in Georgia, Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, Joint Base Emerson, Joint Base Elm Elmendorf Richardson in Alaska. I'm not familiar with that base. Fort Bliss in Texas and Fort Carson in Colorado. And Fort Carson was the one to first break the story, and then people started digging in and realizing, oh, this is a significant issue. And it's just ridiculous. You're taking this money out of their paychecks. This money belongs to those soldiers for the purpose of feeding them, and you're not feeding them. So they're having to go then use more money out of their paychecks to then buy themselves food. And in some cases, if they don't have a car, their ability to access food is limited to the point where they're using like vending machines to get sustenance. This is not sustainable. This is not appropriate. And this has been going on for what looks like a year or more. So I think there's got to be some serious comeuppance and accountability on this. This is absolutely inappropriate and unacceptable. No soldier or military personnel should be treated this way. No one who serves our country in the military should be being starved by the military and having their money stolen. So I believe that that is a serious breach of trust amongst the service members and the Department of Defense. And I genuinely want to see that rectified as soon as possible. And I know for a fact that in one of those installations cases, because again, I verified this information before I reported it, and it's now getting much broader coverage because other people are verifying this. These soldiers went through the proper chains of commands to report the abuse they were receiving in not being provided adequate food. They went and filed reports and complaints, and nothing was done. It wasn't until they started reporting this on social media and reaching out to the media that anything was getting fixed. And that is absolutely appalling. You can tell by the tone of my voice, I might be a little bit passionate about that and by my word choice. So yes, I have a little bit of bias, people, but I think in this particular situation, it's understandable. And I do know soldiers directly affected by this, so it's also a little personal. Now, moving on to the next one, it appears, and this is coming from Breitbart reporting that the Department of Defense contracted with Reuters. The report is emerging that Thomson Reuters received $9 million in contracts from the United States Department of Defense between 2018 and 2022. The contract evaluating defense tools against social engineering threats and engaging. And this was the line item. This is what the money was line itemed for. Large scale social deception. Why? Why were we sending 9 million to Reuters for this? Basically, they were looking at the effectiveness of cyber defense tools and different things like that. We have people who should be doing those things in the DoD themselves. I don't see why Reuters was doing this for us. And I don't understand this allotment of money. I'm not saying it's completely wrong. Maybe there is a justifiable reason behind it. Show me. Please explain. I'd love to know. If there is a good reason for this, okay. But yeah, there's some splaining to do on that one. Just gonna say. That looks a little unusual. And I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt because, again, with these reporting, you don't always get the whole story the first time around. You might get a line item description or something like that. And so just read thoroughly. Read these news reports. Don't just read the headline. Read the whole article. Look at the research studies that it's citing. Look at the things they're citing. Go back and check their sources. Again, you don't have to have an opinion on everything. And if you don't have the time to double check and look at the sources and source material and where they're getting their information and read the research studies and all those things, that's understandable. I do a lot of that for you as my listeners because I know not everyone has the expertise or the time to do those things. But you know what? It's okay not to have an opinion or to be like, you know what? I don't know. And it looks like this, but I don't know that's, the case. And so you can reserve judgment. It's all right. The other thing is, like I mentioned before, cross-referencing information and looking at multiple different perspectives because the same thing is going to be reported differently depending on who's reporting it. And so to intentionally go to resources that have varying opinions or differing and perspectives so that you can see where the overlap is always a really great way of approaching things. The other one is just stay calm. Recognize that your initial emotional reaction may, it's okay. It's okay to have an initial emotional reaction. It's all right to have an initial emotional reaction. However, you don't have to share your initial emotional reactions if you don't want to. You can stop, you can pause and be like, you know what? I feel this way about it now. Let's see if I feel that same way tomorrow or later, or when I've heard some more, or just taken some time to process it. Because, like I said, when I first saw that information about Reuters getting that money, I'm like, say what? But I don't know that there's not a decent explanation on what they were doing. Maybe there is. Or when I saw that Disney was getting that money, I'm like, huh? And then I stopped and thought about it. I'm like, oh, wait, maybe this. So your initial reaction may change over time. And the other thing is also looking for people who have different perspectives. I am really grateful that I have a wide group of family and friends who view the world in different ways than I do, because oftentimes they will catch things that I miss. And when we can calmly and kindly and rationally have constructive and civil conversations, we both walk away, all of us walk away with a greater understanding of what's going on in the world. Our perspectives may not change, but our understanding of what we're dealing with can. So that's just always something to keep in mind. There's just so much going on. And you know what? In our interconnected world and the rapid spreading of information that we have to deal with, some things are accurate, some things are not. That can significantly impact our perception and our way of approaching what we do in our lives. So it's important to take a breather, stop, you know, think about things, have an open conversations with people, seek to understand and view other people's perspectives with an open mind. You might end up catching something you didn't catch before. Look at the sources and understand or realize that you don't have to have an opinion on everything. It's okay. Or to reserve judgment. That's fine. So let's just commit to hopefully being a little bit more patient with each other. I really, really hope that that's what we can see in this year in 2025. Maybe we all take a deep breath collectively. Maybe we get offline once a week and just unwind and detach from this 24-hour news cycle and social media that never seem to stop, and get outside and enjoy the sunshine and breathe some fresh air and touch grass and go on a hike. Because it's okay. It's okay to take a break and take time to process things. Also, when you're hearing rumors, know that rumors are rumors and take them with a grain of salt. That said, overall, more than anything else, let's try to be the good that we want to see in this world. And maybe when we are seeing those things that are sad, unfortunate, or problematic, look for our own options. And I want to circle back to one of those things. When one of the installations that was dealing with the food shortages, it came to light, the Chaplains Association stepped up and provided Thanksgiving dinner for those single soldiers so that they would have a proper meal on Thanksgiving, because those who weren't able to go home weren't going to get one from the dining facilities. So maybe we don't have to wait for the government to fix our problems or for some external, source to come in and save the day. Maybe we can recognize that there are things we can personally do to make the world a better place for ourselves and those around us. That all said, thank you all for the support and appreciation. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and review if possible. It really helps with the algorithms, and I appreciate all of the feedback I get from you guys. If you know of anyone who is interested in being interviewed on the podcast or participating in one of the military spouse panels I do, please let me know. I love interviewing military spouses, veterans, or anyone who is associated with the military community and sharing their insights, information, and resources so that we as a military community have access to the best options possible to make our lives as good as they can be. Thank you for all that you do. And as always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you've been listening to Life of a Military Wife.